So what we do is we record the calls so that we can send you the recording after the session. So let's start. Today what we are going to look at is, this particular unit, which is business environment. Now this unit, business environment, primarily we look at studying as the first unit, because when you study the course business and management, we work within an organization. When you work within a business, you need to understand what is a business, how does the business work, and what are the factors, or what are the internal and external factors which can actually affect the business environment or the business when you're trading, when you're doing, making some profit, you're a charity or you're a different type of organization. So we'll understand today what is a business, why businesses are, registered, how they are registered, what are the different types, and, also understand from a point of view of making sure that what are the factors which can actually affect business is something that we will study. So let's look at going through some slides. Now, the main reason why you want to study this unit is because all of us work, within an organization, and at some stage, what we want to be able to do is we want to make sure that we are able to contribute to the business and also contribute to the organization where we work. So let's understand some key terms before we get into the actual details of the unit. What do you think is, what I've done is I've defined some terms here. So the key terms are, first of all, let's understand what is a business and what is business environment. Now, before I get into this, what I want to do is also look at, say, for example, look at defining a business first. Now, a business is, it's some sort of an entity. Yeah. When I say it's like an organization or an entity which individuals actually register when they start doing some sort of a business activity. That means they start an activity of selling, manufacturing, producing. And when you do that kind of an activity wherein you are going to sell your products and services, at some stage, individuals go out and what they do is they register a business. Now, business is defined as, if I look at the definition of business, it's a legally recognized entity which is designed to provide goods and services to customers. So an example is when you look at McDonald's, when you look at, say, for example, KFC, they are all businesses. But why did they need to form a company, or why did they need to form a business? Because they have to sell their products and services to customers. What is the product that you get from McDonald's?
Yeah, McDonald's.
What product do you get from McDonald's? What do you buy from McDonald's?
Hamburger.
And that's correct. So you buy what is, when you're hungry, you go to McDonald's and you order a hamburger or a cheeseburger. So that is a product which, the company actually sells. So when the company is set up as a business, and then it basically looks at, selling its services to customers, then you have some sort of a, some sort of an enterprise through which you are able to do business.
Sorry, Omar, please.
So that one, what happens is when you form a company and you start selling, when you start selling what you call, products and services, then after that, what happens is you basically start to generate some money or profit, because you're selling goods. So when you look at McDonald's as a business, just as an example, when you look at this particular business, what tends to happen is this business is operating within, a particular environment. So when I say McDonald's has some competitors, who are the other companies which also sell hamburgers or burgers? Can you think of one or two other companies which sell the same product? Other businesses which sell product or kind of product. So you have KFC, KFC, Kentucky Fried Chicken. They also sell, burgers. You have, other such businesses which sell different types of products, which is basically a burger, a milkshake, those kind of things which McDonald's sells. And when a lot of companies and a lot of such businesses operate in an environment in a particular city, then what we see is there's a bit of competition between these companies to sell their services to different customers. So when we see the emergence of a bit of competition or, multiple types of products being sold to customers, then it becomes something called a market. Because at some stage, all these businesses have some outlets or, venues from this where they operate. And this is particularly called a market. So where does McDonald's have the restaurant? Where do you go to McDonald's restaurant or you go to KFC or Big Burger? These are different places that you go to get the meal or the burger. And that is where you will see that they operate out in a certain environment or a market. Isn't it? Correct? Yes. So when we look at that place of operation wherein all of these businesses are present, we can term this as what is called environment or a market. Environment. Yeah, environment or a market. Now, because there are so many different types of businesses and which are selling, products and services to customers. So when you go to your market, you see there are hawkers which are selling vegetable. You see there are hawkers which are selling clothes. You see outlets or businesses selling food. You also sometimes go to a supermarket, and in the supermarket they're selling paper, other items. So what you realize is when you go to such a location, you will see that all these businesses or different types of businesses are operating in something called a marketplace. And that marketplace is, in a way, we can term as environment. Now, imagine a situation that it begins to rain. Suddenly, it begins to rain. You have lots of customers in the market, but it begins to rain. The rain is falling down very heavily. So what will happen is, what will happen when it starts to rain? Imagine you're shopping and it starts to rain. What will happen?
Raining, right?
Yeah, it's a rainy day. So what will happen? You'll open up an umbrella.
People.
Yeah. So what will happen is, go on.
Delivery.
So what will happen is, yes, in those cases, if it starts to rain, you might return home and you order a delivery. That is one option. The second is you might get into a shop and you might take some, refuge from the rain. The third is if you are carrying an umbrella, you open the umbrella and you still continue shopping, but you are, saved from the rain because you have an umbrella with you. But when you look at it starts to rain, sometimes you will see that the small shop owners, they start to close the business because, the material or the things they are selling in the market might get wet or, get, say, for example, they might get destroyed or, might get damaged. So what they do is they quickly cover the material up with sheets in order to protect it from water. So when we look at the rain coming down, now when it starts to rain, it is raining for not just one business, but when you are in the market, it is raining for all the businesses, isn't it? All the businesses, everybody is seeing the rain. So this is a factor in the business environment or in the market when you are there. You cannot control rain. But this is a factor which is going to affect all the businesses. So everybody starts to cover their, products they are selling or goods they are selling in order to protect it from rain. Because this factor is not in your control, we call this an external factor. So weather, when it rains, whether it's sunny or when it starts to rain, weather is an external factor to the business. You cannot control the weather. But let's look at another example. There are certain things which you can control in the business. Things like your cost, how many people you employ, how much do you want to sell, what money you want to make on in terms of the product being sold. So if you sell maybe say as a market as a seller in the market or as a business in the market, you decide that I'm going to sell today 20 burgers only. But because after 20 burgers you do not have the inventory, you do not have more raw material to make burgers. So the moment you sell 20 burgers, you close the shop and you go home because you don't have any more raw material to make the burgers. So when you decide what you are going to sell, how much you are going to sell, this is something which is within your control or in the internal control of the business. So that is why these factors are called internal factors. So if a staff, one of your delivery boys decides to leave the job, that means you have to pick up the delivery and go and do it. And this is a factor which is only internal to you in the business, because if a boy leaves the work at your end, does not mean that the other businesses cannot deliver food to customers. They have their own delivery boys. But because your delivery boy has left, that means it will affect your business or maybe for that day, because you have to find somebody new. And this factor is only specific to your business. That is why it is called an internal factor. Is that okay? Understood? Are you with me on that? So far understood? Okay. Now, when I take this forward, so let's understand. So when you have a broad understanding of what is a business, what is a market, and what is an environment, let's look at understanding what is a business environment, because the unit is about business environment. So let's understand the definition of business environment. Business environment is nothing but a combination of factors which can affect the activities of your business. Yeah. So it could be factors such as your suppliers, your competitors, competition. It could be, staff. It could be technology. It could be laws or legislation. It could be activities which the government does, and economic activities which is an outcome of how the government policies or government announced policies are for a particular country. So here, if I look at a particular factor, like in the UK, if I look at just the UK, the current climate is that UK is leaving the European Union. Correct?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of discussion on, we are leaving the EU. There's a lot of discussion on what is called the, Brexit, which is Britain, leaving EU. Britain is leaving, EU. So there's a lot of discussion around Brexit. So a lot of discussions are happening on what is called, Brexit, which is not something which UK businesses can control, because Brexit can happen if the European Parliament and the UK Parliament can actually decide, mutually decide on the terms of leaving, and what terms. So when the terms are decided, then Britain can leave the European Union. But because there is uncertainty, in terms of Brexit, as of now, it is affecting businesses both in the UK and in the EU. So what is happening is, because of the non-decision, it is affecting businesses both in the UK and also in the EU. Now, when you look at uncertainty, this uncertainty can arise from internal factors or external factors. And that is what the business environment is made of. So there are two types of business environments. The first is, which basically primarily consist of internal business factors, and the other would be external business factors. So when we look at uncertainty, or something which is not certain, can be result of either internal factors or external factors. So when we look at business environment, there are two types. One is internal and the other external. Okay. Now let's look at internal environment. Now, internal, as I explained to you, is a combination of factors which are within the control of the company. They are factors which the company can control. And what are these factors which company can control? It could be staff, it could be finances, it could be technology, it could be, say, physical, assets like your office, those kind of things. These are factors which are. Yes, go ahead.
Internal factors is inside company.
Absolutely correct. So internal factors is basically nothing but inside company. And external factors is something which is outside the company. Okay. So what are the factors outside the company? Economy. Say inflation rate. Exchange rate. Import or export policy. These are factors that are external to the company, because import-export policy is decided by the government. So this policy, when the government makes it for all the businesses. So internal factors are factors which are inside the company, and these factors could be factors like, number of people to employ, how many people you employ. Okay, it could be your supply, it could be your partners, it could be finances. These are factors which you can control. So we need to understand business environment consists of two things: internal factors and external factors. Internal factors inside the company, external factors outside the company. Okay?
Okay.
Now when we look at external factors, there are two types. Okay? First is micro business factors. So first type is micro business, and the second type is macro business. Okay? Micro is when they are totally dependent on business operations. So here we will learn a tool called, to understand micro factors, we will use a tool called SWOT analysis.
Micro
factors. And for macro factors, which we will use a tool which will be called pestle analysis. So pestle analysis, P stands for political factors.
Political factors.
E for economic factors. And so on and so forth. So we'll discuss these. So when we look at external factors, they are of two types: micro and macro.
Macro
is first micro factors which are totally dependent on business operations. Okay. And when we look at micro factors, they could be things like your suppliers, your customers, your marketing intermediaries, competition, and even public. And when we look at external macro business factors, we are talking about environmental factors. Now, environmental factors could be PESTLE. That means P for political, E for economic, S for socio-cultural, T for technological, L for legal, and E for environmental factors. So there are lots of different types of external factors which can affect the business. And when you look at external factors, there are two types. One is micro, second is macro. We study the micro factors using a framework called SWOT analysis, and macro business factors we study using the tool called PESTLE analysis.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Okay.
Okay, good sir. Now let's look at some of the other things. What are stakeholders? Can you think of what are stakeholders?
No.
Okay.
Stakeholders?
What are stakeholders? Now, when we say stakeholders, what we mean is people. If I just very briefly explain that here. So if I look at stakeholders, stakeholders are people who have some sort of a, vested interest in the business, right? So stakeholders are people who have either shares of the company, they could be managers, they could be management of the company, it could be employees of the company, anybody who has a vested interest. Stakeholders are people or people who have some interest in the business or the company or organization, whichever way you call it. Right? So what could be the stakeholders? Investors. Correct? Somebody who invests in the company. Directors of the company, they are stakeholders. Employees are stakeholders. Suppliers or partners are stakeholders. Right? You also have government, as a stakeholder, because the government makes the law, legislation, and set the policies, correct? Now, there are other stakeholders also, and these stakeholders could be shareholders, people who own the shares of the shareholders, yeah. It could be local community. Sometimes if you see some companies, what they do is when they manufacture, they donate some part of their profits to charities because they want the community to grow. They want the general public or, a particular city where they operate to also grow and, prosper. So you will see that large companies like Samsung, you look at companies like Unilever, they always associate with some local charity or local community to try and bring an upliftment or bring progress in that community. So sometimes when companies work with charities or for I would say humanity purposes, in those cases what the companies do is they work with local communities to be able to bring benefit to the society. So they could also be what is called stakeholder. Clear on this? Now, one of the other stakeholders that we are studying is the environment. Because a business has to operate in an environment. That could be a particular country, a particular city. It could be, having operations in different countries. So if you look at Samsung, Samsung has operations in Philippines, Vietnam, Taiwan, Korea, China, India, lots of different countries. So it faces competition, it faces, challenges which come from both internal environment and external environment. So environment is a main stakeholder. Now, if you look at a company, like say for example Samsung, if they have to, if they don't recycle some of their products like washing machines or dishwashers, microwave oven, they can't just throw this away in the landfill. So a lot of companies are under, some sort of jurisdiction and government policy to recycle their old equipment. So when they look at this kind of a requirement, this is introduced by whom? For all companies. Who introduces this legislation for the companies? That you have to recycle your goods. Who introduces this legislation or law? So this is generally introduced by, the government. So when you look at companies operating in a particular environment and when they conform to law and legislation, you will see that this is put in place by the government and they are also a stakeholder in the business. Now, sometimes you will see that businesses require what is called input, and this input comes from different sources. So like if you're producing, let's stick to the example of McDonald's. Now McDonald's has lots of restaurants, and if they have lots of restaurants, they require a lot of raw material to produce burgers, wraps, and other things. So when we look at McDonald's in particular, they require to produce, say, if you go to one particular outlet and you look at McDonald's, they are, they are providing wraps, ice creams, drinks, sodas, burgers to any customer which is coming in and paying for the services. But in order for them to produce that particular product, if I say a service, which is a burger or a wrap or a drink, what McDonald's has to do is they rely on what is called raw material. And that raw material could be, buns, ketchup, lots of chicken, whatever it is, but food products coming in through supply chain. That means they have a lot of suppliers who supply this in the morning or in the evening so that they have enough inventory to produce those burgers throughout the day. So when you look at businesses, they require what is called input. And input can come in the form of different types, different shapes. It could be raw material input, it could be input from suppliers, it could be input or, work which is being done by the employees. It could be input which is primarily related to, raw material. Sometimes you will see it could be in the form of land, because when you look at companies like McDonald's, Starbucks, they also own what are called their own fields from which, or they have lots of close working tie-ups with farmers. When they buy products or they procure products, they procure it from, their set of farmers or their set of, land in order to have some sort of an integration in the supply chain. So they want predictability. So what businesses require is they require input, and input can come in the form of labor, equipment, material. Now, assuming one question which I want to ask. Now, assuming all the raw material has come to McDonald's and they want to produce now a burger. So you go to the outlet and you say, okay, I want to have a hamburger. So can McDonald's produce the hamburger on their own, or do they need something else to produce the burger? How will they produce the burger? How do you think? So they need what is called machinery and equipment, because when you order a burger or you order a shake, the shake will be produced by the machine, and the machine is going to be operated by the staff. And at some stage they will need some raw material like a cup holder or some of the other things like a straw in a cup to be able to serve that drink to you. So before you get your drink, the order goes through a couple of things wherein inputs are required. So the input will come from the machine, will produce the shake. The shake has to be poured into a glass or a container, and the container has to have a lid and it has to have a straw. And then the person at the counter will actually hand over the shake to you when you pay the money. So it requires processing or input, and that input is required in the form of something called raw material, and that raw material is available within McDonald's to be able to serve that shake to the customer. Correct?
Yeah, okay.
Now let's look at what businesses do. How do they look at utilizing resources? So you know that resources are limited. So every business has to recycle. And when they recycle, what they're trying to do is they're trying to manage the usage of their resources. And why sometimes usage of resources has to be done, in a way wherein it is sustainable for the long run, is because the government law and legislation requires businesses to produce less waste, which goes to the landfill. So when you look at all that, what you're looking at is that at some stage, in order to make money or profit, businesses have to use, resources wisely. Okay?
Yeah, I know.
Okay. Now let's look at one classification of business. Now, how many types of businesses can you see? There are two types: private sector and public sector. These are two broad classifications. Now, there are other types also we will discuss, but private sector is a private business which is owned by individuals or individual interest. That means you have some shares and these shares are only with you and it becomes a private business. Public sector businesses which are owned by the government or controlled by the bodies as a collective interest. So in the UK, when you look at the National Health Service, NHS is owned by the...
Sorry?
When you look at National Health Service in the UK, National Health Service is a private sector business or a public sector business?
No.
Okay.
So
in the UK, NHS is a public sector business because it is owned by the university. Oh, sorry, not by the university, by the government, sorry. So in this case, what I suggest is when we look at the classification of businesses, anything which is owned by the government or by the members of public will become a public sector business. Anything which is owned by an individual will become a private sector business. Now in private sector, we have different types: sole traders, partnership companies, franchise, and cooperative. And in public sector, we have businesses which have government share holding. That means that the majority of the share is owned by the government in that organization. There are other types of public sector businesses. One of them is called quangos, which are semi-government organizations. Okay? They are semi-government organizations. That means they are partly private and partly owned by the public sector, or basically members of the public. Now let's look at a broad classification of these in terms of, as a small exercise. I want to look at understanding which is primary and which is secondary and what is, tertiary. So I want to look at this very briefly with you. Let's look at this as an example. Now, one thing which I want to understand in the business is there are three types of activities the business can do. First activity is called primary. The second type of activity in the business is called secondary activity. And the third type of activity in the business is called tertiary. Now, primary activity is when you are producing the goods yourself, first hand. So when I look at farmers, companies digging out iron ore, companies digging out diamond from the diamond mine, they are primary because they are taking out the product from the earth. When you look at coal companies, they are primary businesses because they are digging the mother earth to produce coal. Now, when that digging is done, when the farmer grows the crop, they sell the crop to intermediaries or somebody in the secondary market. And this secondary market means they will actually produce, using the raw material, a finished product. So when you look at coal suppliers or people who are mining coal, companies which are mining coal, they mine the coal, then they send it to a processing facility where the coal is actually extracted from the soil. Now, in that case, they are manufacturing coal from, the mother earth. So they are the ones which are producing a finished product. So from the raw material, which is the coal, you also have different types of coal which is produced. You have charcoal which is produced, you have peat which is being produced. Now these are different type of products which are coming from the main product which has been mined from the earth. So in this case, the companies which are responsible for mining the product from Mother Earth will be called primary businesses because they're extracting it. The ones which are processing it to provide a finished good will be called the secondary businesses, or they are manufacturing or production. And the tertiary ones would be when you want to buy coal for barbecue. So for your barbecue, you go to the supermarket and you buy the coal from there. So the supermarket, which is selling the finished product to you for consumption, is going to be a tertiary business, or a business which basically sells the good finally to the customers. Yes. So in this case, what you see is that there are three different types of business activities which business can do, which is categorized into primary, secondary, and tertiary. Now let's look at, this is a bit of an exercise that I want you to do, is to say which type of business, name here falls into which category. So a coal miner, which should be what kind of activity is doing? So coal miner will be primary business because they are producing, or he's involved in mining the coal from the earth. Correct? So this is primary. What is a bus driver, for example?
Secondary.
Absolutely. So the customer who's traveling in the bus, going from one location to the other, will be tertiary. So this is what you need to do as a bit of an exercise, and I think you understand this. That's great. Now let's look at one or two other things which I want to just quickly cover when we look at types of organization. So when we look at organization in its type, what we want to understand and study is that there are some types of organizations or businesses which basically produce goods and services for charity. They will not want to make money on it. There are some which are producing goods to sell and make money or profits on it. And then there are some which will provide these services for the sake of providing, but the money is going to be paid by somebody else. So what are the different types? So one is businesses which make profit. That means they are private limited companies. They are owned by individuals, and their main aim is to make production by commercial activity, and their aim is to sell the products or services and then make profits. Then you have organizations like charities, various charitable organizations. They do not make money, out of the operations. They basically provide services which could be for humanity, for basic causes, and their aim is to break even, but they do not want to make any profit. So they are organizations which are for greater good of humanity. They will fulfill some social causes, and they are primarily termed as charities. Now, there will be certain other types of businesses, entities, organizations, which will provide services, but these services that they provide are paid for by the government. Like in the UK, health service is provided by the government. So NHS, which is the National Health Service, is funded by the government, and here the taxpayer, people who pay taxes, the government which collects the taxes actually pays from those taxes collected to run the National Health Service. So when we look at these type of businesses, sometimes some businesses are primarily for serving. That means they will provide the service for the greater good of humanity. There will be some businesses which are making money or selling products and services to make profit, and their main aim is profit maximization. The third is when you look at certain businesses which have certain objectives to fulfill, but as soon as that objective is fulfilled by increasing by making that revenue or by reaching that goal, they will stop making more money, or stop selling more services, because they are funded indirectly through the government, and their aim is to provide those basic services, like you sometimes look at in some countries, train services, medical services, things like that. Now, going further very quickly, what we look at is, if we look at different types of businesses, in private sector, we classify them as different types: sole trader, partnership, cooperatives, and then when you have companies, you have different types of companies, private limited companies, public limited companies, limited liability companies, and things like that. So this is a bit of classification which I have done for you to read through in the presentation, which I'm going to send to you so that you know and understand what are the advantages and disadvantages and why some of these companies are registered in such a manner. When you have partnerships, why do you have sole trader, why do you have limited company, and that is explained in some of these slides for you to go through. I'm going to go to one slide wherein I'm going to summarize this. So let's look at a summary. So in this, if you see the summary, what we are looking at is when we look at private limited, in particular private sector, we have different types of ownership. So I can classify the companies or organizations on the basis of what is called ownership. And when I look at ownership, when I say sole trader, that means there is one owner of the company. When I say partnership, when you look at accounting firms, when you look at solicitors, when you look at certain businesses wherein you have lots of partners, then the firm is called partnership. Similarly, public limited company, which is guaranteed by shares. And then you have public limited, which is a company which is listed on the stock exchange. So that means the ownership is in the public hands. That means anybody who is a member of the public can actually buy shares of that company. So difference between private limited and public limited is that in private limited, the shares are technically owned by maybe 2, 3, 4 people who are the directors of the company. But when I look at public limited company, these companies are trading on the stock exchange, and members of the public, anybody, common man, can actually buy shares for the company. Cooperatives is something which is a term used in the UK and in some other European countries, wherein this means that the ownership has multiple owners and the liability that the ownership has or the multiple owners have is limited. So some of the banks in the UK are something called societies or cooperatives like Nationwide. Now these, or you look at John Lewis Partnership, here each employee of the company owns share in the company. So they are a partial owner and also an employee in the organization. So there, when the relationship is that the workers of the company own the company as well, then in that case, we generally see cooperatives being formed. And then you have government agencies, and then you have charities or charitable trusts. So when you look at Macmillan, you look at Oxfam, you look at a lot of other charities, they are all charities because they are registered as a non-for-profit organization, not for-profit organization. And here they collect or they receive money in the form of donations or grants from the government and other businesses. That is why they are classified as something called charities. Is that clear? Is that okay? Is that okay so far, Minjay? Yeah. So we are going to stop in today's session because in today's session we have covered Learning Outcome 1, which talks about different types of organizations. It talks about the different purposes. So when you look at charity, when you look at sole trader, public limited company, and then what are the various stakeholders in the organization. So we've looked at that. Okay? Any question for today's session? Any question?
No. Yes.
Okay, so no questions. So if you have any questions, you can email me. One second, I'll share my email with you. If you have any questions, you can email me on this email address, raman@ukversity.co.uk, and I can reply back to you if you have any questions or any doubts. And I am going to now email you the presentation and a handout for reading to cover the Learning Outcome 1. Is that okay?
Learning outcome 1.
Which is what we've covered today. This one.
Okay.
Okay, so you will be able to read from the book what we have studied today, and then also go through this presentation. So when you look at this year, this is one of the things which I've shown you, which is the types of organization depending on ownership. That's first. The second one, what you see, in terms of different types of.
I will try.
Yeah. But I'm also going to send you an email, and this is where you will be able to read some of this material, which is for covering the learning outcome 1. I will email you also. Because of your internet speed, I will email this so that you have it on email also for reading. Okay?
Okay.
And when are we going to meet next? When is the next session?
No. If I try this and then if not, I will send email to you.
That's fine. Absolutely okay. And our next class, class is going to be next week. Okay?
Next week.
Next week.
But tomorrow we have class, right?
Tomorrow you have level 5. Because in your case, yes, you have 2 classes with me. Because you're doing level 4 and then you're doing level 5. So for level 4, we have started, unit business environment. Okay? And for level 5, we are going to start tomorrow another new unit, which is called business organization in global context. So this is the unit that we will study for tomorrow, which is level 5.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
No worries. So I will see you tomorrow then.